Today we're going to be talking about Google Ads, specifically geolocation targeting. This is considered one of the more basic functions within Google Ads. A lot of people just rush through it. I've seen a lot of junior buyers just even say, oh yeah, I can handle this. And then what happens after the post buy, you're not happy with the results, right? And there's a lot of reasons why. Just like search, right? There's broad keywords, but to complement broad keywords, they have negative keywords as well. Because if anybody who's a buyer knows that on the back end, the search terms sometimes don't correlate to how you want the keywords to be. That's where negative keywords come in. And then, of course, there's constraints like phrase and exact match, but that's search. But for location, the same methodology applies. There are exclusions, right? And you should be using exclusions. Also, it does tend to go more broad. There is actually a broad element that happens that defaults when you first use geolocation targeting in Google Ads. You should always be targeting in presence in. The default is presence and interest. Think about it. It's broad. So let's talk about how Google Ads geolocation works and the steps we can take to make sure it's as precise to how your clients want it to be for optimal results. So this is the way the interface usually looks. I apologize to the people listening on podcasts, but of course, most of us are used to this interface. It has location and also has radius. We're going to talk about radius in a minute. And here you enter the city, the geo that you're particularly in, or that you want to target, sorry. And that's really it. And you hit enter. Enough said here. Then, of course, you have the same exact menu, but you have nearby. So a lot of people kind of skip this, or when I ask them about this, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know. Oh, there is a nearby thing. I kind of saw it, but I didn't know what it was." So nearby is when you enter the zip or you enter the city. You click nearby versus target, right? Same exact concept. It's just a little bit of a button. You target that. The nearby zips come up, as well as other cities, right? Depending on where you're at. Zips tend to do nearby zips. They also do cities and towns. Same exact thing with cities. They have cities, but they also include zips. States usually, it will say nearby states, but chances are you're doing states. That's such a macro view. You already know what you're doing. But with zips, man, who has the time to look up the zips, really? So the fact it automatically includes those for you as an option is great. Another item here is the add locations in bulk. Especially when you're adding, 20 cities, 30 cities, 20 zips, 50 zips, you're able to just drop them in and correlate them, just hit target and it automatically drops them in. Make sure you check though, because a lot of cities, I've noticed this when I dropped it in here, a lot of cities have especially in the US, they have that, they don't necessarily have the right naming convention. So a city named similar in Missouri may be the same one in Nevada, maybe the same one in Washington or California, right? Or even Texas. So you have to really be careful and make sure you go through it and make sure you're getting the right city and state accurately. Because sometimes, like I said, it's not one-to-one. Also, one thing is for DMAs. So a lot of DMAs are kind of bunched up, right? So they have I'm not sure if anybody bought DMAs before, but there's like the Los Angeles DMA, the New York DMA, and those are very wide. Those are huge. Those are almost hundreds of miles. But a lot of the smaller areas within the United States, they have 3 cities within that particular DMA and they name it accordingly. And a lot of them have 3-word names. So when you use DMAs, be very careful. That's not always going to be one-to-one. So you may be better off just finding that exact name and trying to locate it manually within here. Cities is okay. So zips is usually pretty easy, but also check that. So it's not always one-to-one. So when you load it in bulk, check it. That's what I'm trying to communicate there. The next thing is, exclusions. I love this topic. So like I was talking about, it's a lot of Google, a lot of people think with location, they just enter it and it's gospel, right? You just, oh, I just want to target Los Angeles, or I just want to target Hollywood. What's the big deal? Just enter Hollywood in, you're good. I can walk away. Actually not. I've encountered this so many times. Even when I use the defaults, even when I use exclusions, I've had this problem. So thank God I actually use the exclusions and the right naming correlation, that's presence, right? So there's presence and interest, and then there's presence. Always use presence and then use the exclusions, because what's going to happen here is you're going to drop somebody in that particular blue area, which is where you want to target, but then they're going to wander off, right? Or they're people coming through. So you want that exclusion in place. I mean, it's real, and I know it's a pain, guys, because I don't think you can do I believe you cannot do nearby when you do exclusion. So it's always a best practice. And it's always going to look kind of like a broken puzzle. Like you're not going to have every zip, and not every zip is perfect, but it's good to show that you did that, right? Because it's providing that extra layer of scrutiny where you're just targeting people in the area you want, right? Because let's be honest, on Facebook, they got rid of people living in. It's people living in, and the exact name is recently in. So that's the new default. So you can't even do living in anymore exclusively. It's people that recently were in there. So if you're like I go back to Miami, New York, and LA example. Well, those are all heavily trafficked areas. So that's a whole other thing we need to vet. That's why I was saying you probably need to use exclusions a lot more moving forward. I would say the days of presence only is probably counting down, right? I'd say maybe this year or next year they're going to get rid of it and just call it presence or interests. And the problem with interest is, say I live in Hollywood, right? So if I live in Hollywood or LA and I go to I want to check out places in, I have family in Miami, right? And I just, want to just check it out, but I'm not going till the end of the year or maybe next year, and I'm just checking out clubs or restaurants or bars, that are there. I'm going to just check it out, but I don't want to be targeted. That's where the exclusion comes in, because you're getting rid of that layer. So it's, again, very important you include that. And then, just make sure that's done. And then I know for zips, it's a little tricky. For here on this particular graph, this is what I was saying when you actually set up the campaign. Here you have your presence or interest that I was talking about, who showed interest, but that's the default. You see what I'm saying? So you want to use the presence. The default will always be the top one, which is the one you do not want. So keep that in mind. And this is when you set up the campaign. Radius targeting. This is great. So for radius targeting, I actually use this more than I use the other targets, because if you notice with, like, when you deal with these huge areas like LA, that goes all the way to Long Beach, it goes all the way up to the Valley, it goes all the way to Pasadena almost, right? So what I love about radius targeting is if you enter a particular zip, you can just do 3 miles from there, 5 miles from there. You're not at the mercy of like just finding the zips or finding the city itself and then trying to narrow it down. So the radius thing really comes in handy. I probably use this more than I use the other ones. And then another thing is the outside of radius that I love is the art of pinning. Pinning is very cool. That's where you actually, if you're in the map and you check out radius, you click in pin and you can actually zoom in to the exact intersection you want. And that's where it's great. So say you want to target from this intersection all the way out, right? You can do that. So you find that intersection on the map and you do whatever, 10, 20 miles from that area you want to include people to target. That's very cool. I love that. Most people don't know about the pinning. When I mention it, some people are like, oh yeah, that's cool. I kind of saw it there, but I didn't know what it was. So that's what it was. Highly recommend that one as well. That's very cool. And then, lastly, this is so important. Man, make sure when you're setting up your campaigns for location targeting, or when you're filling that area out, make sure you talk with the client on what may happen, because if they're an experienced client and they know buying and they look in their ad buys, they may check this up and may question you on this. So this is when you enter, let's say you enter 20 DMAs in here, right? And if it's a results driven buy, this is what will probably happen. You enter 20 DMAs in there, and if you're lucky, you'll have 5 that are the top, right? In this particular buy, we entered 38. Of that 38, only 2 DMAs received 70% of the spend. That means 36 DMAs received peanuts, received the remaining 30%. So now, if it's a results-driven buy, this is the recommendation, really, because it's all results driven. You're just trying to maximize your conversions. However, if you're dealing with a client that has multiple locations, such as a franchisee, and that franchisee puts so much into the ad budget, guess who's going to be very frustrated, and it's not going to be a good conversation, right? So you're going to have to break out those campaigns or understand how the geo works. And this is a very common graph, folks. This is a very common graph. So the last thing you want is to have to explain this after the buy happened. You want to explain it pre, saying, oh yeah, by the way, when we do results-driven campaigns and you're giving me all these DMAs, I just want to let you know that usually it usually just combines the spends to the top performing audiences, which is roughly a quarter of them, maybe even less, maybe even 10%. So, literally 10% sometimes receive 90% of the spend. So, and then the rest has to be divided amongst it. And then, like I said, if there is a mandate, if the other stores need coverage, you're going to have to break them out by campaign. There's no other way. So keep that in mind and make sure you know this ahead of time. This will happen. And this, I've had conversations at other agencies about this where I worked with a buyer, I had a supervisor check it, and then the client checks on their side, and then guess who has a call, right? And guess who's frustrated. So make sure absolutely this is discussed pre-campaign. And then thank you for joining us. You can follow our conversations on Medium. We also have this carried on all other podcast platforms such as Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and iHeart, which is very cool. And then we're on LinkedIn. And then feel free to check out our site, yrvdynamics.com, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions on this. Please like, and then let's discuss let's discuss your question. I'm on LinkedIn, so I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much.